Here's why the next election will probably not be the most important of our lifetimes. And it's not because we haven't just had an important one. It's because this is probably the single most overused and misleading phrase politicians like to roll out every couple years. We get constantly bombarded with headlines and speeches from politicians, consultants, and their allies in the media that if you don't vote this time, the world as we know it is coming to an end. But is that really true? Now, before we get too far into this, let's acknowledge the other side of this argument. Elections can be incredibly important, and I certainly don't mean to suggest to people that they shouldn't care or participate. But here's the thing. When every election is the most important, people start to conclude that none of them are. Voting can be a crucial tool to preserving individual liberty, and it's something that generations have fought and died for. But if we're going to recognize the importance of voting, we also need to recognize that voting isn't the magic wand that solves all of our country's problems. And the longer we continue to tell the public that it is, the greater our disappointment will be when elections don't produce the outcomes we had hoped for. And that's part of the problem of calling every election the most important one in our lifetime. Because for decades, people have been misled and even blatantly lied to about how their votes will single-handedly fix all of the societal issues we face. It's become the political equivalent of crying wolf. And so it should come as no surprise that many people have simply stopped listening. Perhaps most alarming of all of this is the fact that the constant drumbeat of this is the most important election has ended up resulting in a vast amount of power being concentrated in Washington, D.C. Because think about it. When every election is framed as some sort of existential crisis, it feeds into the idea that the government needs to possess this vast, unchecked authority that they can wield on our behalf. And this is part of the reason that we have entire political movements now dedicated to pushing things like censorship or even jailing their ideological opponents in order to save our democracy. But in trying to save democracy, many of these same politicians and their enablers are actually sowing the seeds of its demise. America's political system thrives when it's built on checks and balances, with power distributed among many various branches of government and at various levels of representation. Many of those things are now being torn down in the name of winning the most important election and keeping the bad guys out of office. Not to mention creating ridiculous expectations that the government can solve our problems as long as the right people are in charge. So, where does this actually leave us? Well, by all means, participate in elections. Go out there and vote for the best candidate or party that you think matches your values. But let's not be fooled into thinking that it's the sole way that we're going to confront our nation's challenges. The salvation of our country is not going to hinge on a single election or the election of the right person. It will come when we collectively realize that our government shouldn't wield so much power that every election feels like it's the most important in history. We need to re-embrace the fact that what truly makes America great is not just your right to vote every couple years, but the far more important rights associated with being able to make decisions for your own life free from the interference of the people we happen to elect every couple years.